Hi guys, welcome to today's video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys exactly when to use variant properties or component properties in your designs. I've gotten a lot of questions around component properties, and I figured that the answer to this most times lies between having a good understanding of the differences between the usage of variant properties or component properties. I'm going to be using this page here to explain the differences between these, and I got this page from the component property playground. You can get this from the Figma community. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you find any of my videos helpful. So guys, in order to understand the differences between the variant properties and the component properties, we have situations here or scenarios where you need to use either of these. So for this, the very first one here says different size, color, and styling. And for this, definitely you want to use a variant property. When you have a situation where you want to have a component with different colors, you definitely want to use a variant property. And to explain that, I'm going to be working with this snack bar here. So if you have a snack bar like this where you want to create different variants of this particular snack bar, let's say we want to have an error message or we want to have a warning message, you would want to create a variant property, right? So let's say you have a duplicate of this, and you want to have something like a red snack bar with the error message. You definitely want to have a variant property. So I'm just going to make this a component, right? And I'm going to create a variant for this component, right? And for this variant, I'm going to change the color. I'm going to change the fill to a red fill, and I'm going to change the text from this is a success message to this is an error message. I'm also going to change the icon. I have an error message icon here, so I'm just going to swap it for what we have here. So this is a typical example where you want to use a variant property, because as you can see here, we have two different variants with different color. You can still go ahead to create more variants. Let's say for this we want to have like a warning message, right? And we can change the color to something like this, and I'm going to pick the warning icon and I'm going to replace it with this. And you can also go ahead to change the message to this is a warning message. So situations like this, obviously you want to use variant properties. As you can see, it also allows us to have like component variants with different sizes and also different styling, right? So let's say this we want to have a stroke to this particular style. You can see that you can add a stroke, and if we create an instance of this particular component here, let's create an instance of this component. With this, you can see that we can switch between different variants of this particular component. If you want to clean this up, you can go ahead to give each of these properties their individual names so that you can properly identify them. To do that, you can just set a property to this entire component by clicking on the component and coming to this property section here and clicking on this edit property. So you can give it a particular property name. Let's give it something like snack bar types, or let's say snack bar, and you can give it different values. The first one can be, let's say, success. The second one can be error, and the third one can be warning. So with this, if you click on this instance, you can see that we can switch between different variant properties of this particular snack bar. So this is a typical example where you want to use different sizing, color, or style. You definitely want to use a variant property. Now to check out the second scenario, which is different states, and definitely you want to use a variant property for that also. So for different states, this is typically when you want to have like an interactive component, right? A variant property is perfect for creating interactive components, and it's made for that actually. So to explain that, I'm going to take this particular toggle button here, and I'm going to create two different states that we can interact between that we can create an interaction on. So I'm going to create another state, and this is going to be the off state, which obviously is going to have a different color, and I'm going to move this indicator all the way to the left. Now we have two states on this, which is the on state and the off state. To create an interaction, we know we have to select both of these and create a component set on them. You can get this little message here that says some variants have the same property values applied, and this is happening because if you select this component and you open it up here, you're going to see that both variants in this component have the same name, which is this default and default here. So one way you could fix that is, let's just press Ctrl or Command Z to go back to this state. As you can see, both of these frames are called switch. One way to fix that is to make one of these a different name. Let's say switch 1, for example. And if you select both of these and create a component set, you're going to notice that we don't get that message. But let's say you find yourself in the situation where you don't want to go back and both of these are the same name. Let's select them both and create component set. To fix this, what you're going to do is you're going to click on one of the components that is not the default component. Let's say the first one is the default component and you want to leave it like that. You can click on the second one, come over to this property section, click on this little drop down here and say add new. It now gives you the ability to add a new property variant, right? So here it gives you a default name of new value. You can choose to leave it like that or rename it. I'm going to rename this to off state, right? And I'm going to click on this. I'm going to rename it from default also to on state. So I'm going to click on the entire component itself to change the name of this property 1. So I don't want it to be property 1. I want it to be let's say toggle, for instance, right? So here, if we create an instance of this particular component, you can now see that we have two different states, which is the on state and the off state. So for this scenario where it says different states, that is interactive, it means you can create an interaction between the variants in this component. So to do that, I'm going to click on one of these variants. I'm going to switch to the prototype section and I'm going to connect the wires down to the second one. I'm going to leave it at an on-click trigger, and you can choose to leave it at smart animate or instance. I'm going to leave it at smart animate. I'm going to return the favor from the second variant to the very first variant. And with this, we've successfully created an interaction between the variants in this component set. Now, if I click on prototype to view this, you will notice that we can then click on the instance of that toggle button that we just created, and then we'll be able to switch from the on state to the off state. As you can see here, guys, once I click on it, it switched to the second state, and this is exactly what it means by different states that is being interactive. So these are the two scenarios where you want to use a variant property. Now going to scenarios where you want to use a component property. The very first one here says has Boolean logic, that is on or off visibility. Now to explain that, I'm going to come to this page here that I created for the component properties, and I'm going to be using this element here. So the first thing I'm going to do is to make it a component. As we know, we have to make everything a component to be able to work with it. And to be able to create a Boolean state on your component, basically what it helps you do is, if you have a layer in your component, let's say this icon layer, for example, it lets you automatically turn the icon layer on or off, right? And to do that, all you need to do is to select the layer in your component. Make sure you're in the design panel here, select the layer in your component and come to this layer section here, right? You're going to see this button in the far right that says apply Boolean property. Once you click on it, it gives you the property name, and it gives you a default state to go with, either true or false. I'm going to select false, for instance, and I'm going to click create property. Now we can't see the icon there because we defined it to be false by default. So if we create an instance of this component, let me just create an instance of this component. You will notice that we have a toggle button here that says show info icon, where we can turn it on or off, right? And this is a typical example of when you want to use a component property here, just as it's stated here, has Boolean logic. And the last one here says has instance that needs customization, right? So having instance that needs customization, this typically means when you have an instance of a component inside your component, you might want to change that instance. Let's say that instance has different states. You might want to customize that instance to show something different based on some different conditions. So to explain that, basically we understand that an instance is just like a duplicate of another component. So that means whatever the layer is in your icon, whatever the layer is in your component, it has to be a component. I'm going to edit the properties of this show info icon from false to true, so that the default state is true and is visible. And what this customized instance mean is that when you have an instance of a component in your component, just like the way this icon is, as you can see, this little diamond shape here shows that this is an instance of a component. If you have an instance of a component in your component just like this, right, and it's selected, you will have this button here that says apply instance swap property. This just gives you the ability to swap different instances in your component. So if this is not an instance of a component, you can't get this because you can only customize instances of a component. So to demonstrate that, I'm just going to detach this particular instance of this icon. I'm going to detach it, and you see that we don't get that ability to create an instance swap again. I'm going to press Command or Control Z to go back, and we can see we have this option to create an instance swap. I'm going to go ahead to click on it, and I'm going to name it from instance to, let's say, icon type, for example, icon type. And you can see it gives us a list of all the components on our board because it's an instance swap. It lets us replace that particular instance of a component with other instances that we have on the board. So it's going to show us all the components that we have on the board and give us the ability to swap between the instances of those components. I'm going to leave it at this info icon because that's what we are using at the moment, and I'm going to click create property. Now if you click on the instance of this component that we just created, you're going to notice that we have a property that says icon type, and once you click on the property, you can switch between all the components that we currently have on this board. I can switch to this arrow icon. If you click on this arrow icon here, right, if you click on this arrow icon here and you try to target the parent component, you're going to see that these are the parent components on the board. So this means you definitely have to have the parent component on the board so that you can swap its instance in the instance of these components that you're creating. I really hope you guys are understanding this. I'm going to switch this back to the original icon instance we are using. So this typically explains what it means to have instance that needs customization. So with this, I hope you guys have gotten the differences between a variant property and component property. So I'm just going to go ahead to create a set of snack bar to just help us better understand the differences in this. So just like what we've done here, I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to create different snack bar, but the first thing I want to do here is I want to make sure the shape don't change. the size of this snack bar doesn't change when we change the text. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on this text, and I'm going to change this from all contents to fixed to make sure it's on fixed, and I'm going to make it a component, right? So once I do that, I'm going to create a component variant, and I'm going to change the color just like the way we did for the very first one. I'm going to change the color. I'm going to update the text. This is an error message. As you can see, the size doesn't change because the text maintains a fixed width, right? So for this, I'm going to change the icon here. I'm going to use this particular error icon. I'm not going to be using an instance swap for this because all the icons will be defined in the different variants that we are going to be creating. So we won't have a need to use an instance swap on the icon. So for this second one, is going to be a warning message. This is a warning message. As you can see, for this, the text is longer, so I might want to increase this up. So this is a warning message. Yeah, I'm going to change the color of the text to a warning color, which is this yellow color here, and I'm going to create one more. But before then, I'm going to change the icon of this to a warning icon. And I'm going to create one more instance of this, and I'm going to make it green. So we are going to have the success snack bar. This is a success message, right? So I'm going to pick this success icon, and I'm going to replace it with what we have here. So guys, we have this set of components, and basically, if you want to create like a custom property for it, you can click on the entire component, right? Come to this section and click on this edit property here. For the property name, just as usual, you can name this snack bar types, and edit the values. The first one is, let's say, information. The second one is error. The third one is warning, and the fourth one is success, right? So once you have an instance of this component here, you can see you have a property of snack bar types, and you can switch between information message, the error message, and the success message. For examples like this, typically you want to use a component variant. But if you choose at any point to use just a component property to create this, that means you have to change the color of that variant every time you choose to use it, right? And this is what I mean. If I detach this particular component, let me detach it for an instance, and I make it a component. Now it's a component on its own, and I want it to have all of these properties without having to create different variants. What I could just do is I'll first make sure all of these are components, right? So that I can switch this particular icon here for different icons. I'm going to make this multiple components, right? Then for this, I'm going to set this to a component swap, right? But I can't do that because this particular icon here is not a component. So I'm going to swap it for an instance of a component. So I'm going to pick this because I just made these components just now, and I'm going to replace it with this, paste to replace. You can also add text properties to your component properties by clicking on the text layer. Coming to this place here, you're going to see a content option that lets you edit the text. You can click on it, and it gives you a text property and value. So we can call this snack bar text, for instance, and let it be. So if you don't want to create multiple variants like this, and you just want to use a single component, every time you create an instance of this component, you would need to change the text and this particular icon and also the color manually, which is not really advisable. But for this, you've noticed that we've not added the instance swap for this particular icon. So to do that, I'm just going to click on this button here that says apply instance swap, and I'm going to I'm going to rename it to icon type, just like we did. So now in the instance of this component we just created, in the instance of this, you're going to see that we can swap the icon from, let's say, success icon to info icon. And for the info icon, we can click on this instance, change the color from this field to blue, and then we can go ahead and change the text to this is an information. This is an information message, for instance. So you will need to do this manually every time you create an instance of this component. So let's create another instance, and we can change from the icon from info icon to, let's say, error icon. Then we change the field color to red. Then we go ahead and change the text from this is an information message to this is a error message. So you can see once we create an instance, we have to set this custom values to the instance we just create, which is not really advisable since we can do that by creating different variants of this particular component. So guys, this is typically it. This is typically the differences between variant properties and component properties. I hope I have been able to clarify every gray area or every thoughts you have that doesn't seem too clear about variant properties and component properties. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell if you find this video helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye.